Welcome to the deep dive. Think about this for a second. How many really great ideas are floating around out there? Millions, maybe billions.
Oh, easily. Ideas themselves aren't exactly rare.
Right, you get that flash of inspiration, maybe a fix for something that annoys you. But look, the world isn't really short on ideas.
No, not at all.
What it actually needs, what's much harder to find, are people who can take those ideas and, build something successful, valuable.
Yeah, execution is everything. It's like Joy Ito from the MIT Media Lab used to say, ideas are everywhere, but the great entrepreneurs, they're the ones who actually create value from them.
Exactly. And that takes more than just being passionate, right? It
Yeah.
takes real skill, discipline. You can't teach passion, sure, but skill that you can definitely teach.
And that focus on skill, on discipline, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Okay.
Our source material, it's drawn from excerpts of this guide on disciplined entrepreneurship. And this isn't just like ivory tower theory. It's a framework that came out of years of intense lectures, workshops at MIT. And it's been shaped, refined by input from literally hundreds of entrepreneurs.
People who've actually been there, done that.
Exactly. Launched companies, hit walls, learned the hard way in the trenches.
So it's less like reading a dense textbook,
Hmm?
maybe more like having a practical guide, a toolkit almost.
That's a great way to put it, a toolkit.
Yeah.
Because starting something new is messy, right? It's ambiguous, chaotic sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
This guide tries to give you that structure, helps you figure out which tool to use when, instead of just, swinging a hammer when you need a screwdriver.
Right. So our mission today for this deep dive is to unpack this guide, pull out the key stuff.
Yeah, the core insights, the practical steps that you, our listener, can maybe use. It's all about bringing that disciplined approach to turning an idea into, hopefully, a thriving business.
Okay, let's get into it. The sources, they admit right up front, starting something new is messy. No sugarcoating it. But they offer this framework, these steps, as a way to cut through that. And they use this visual like a game board.
Yeah, I like that visual too. A winding path on a game board heading towards, the treasure chest at the end. Success.
It breaks down this massive task into, 24 steps?
24 logical steps, yeah. Make
Uh-huh.
it feel more manageable. And interestingly, the guide technically starts after what they call step 0, getting started.
Step 0, what happens there?
That's basically where you've already got the initial spark. The idea, maybe some core technology, and this is crucial, a founding team,
The people.
the people. And the big questions at step 0 are really fundamental. Is this idea actually beneficial for the world, for someone? And maybe just as important, are we, the team, good at this?
Mhm.
And do we actually want to do this, for a long, long time?
That's a serious gut check right there.
It absolutely is, before you even step onto the game board.
Okay, so assume you pass step 0. You've got the idea, the team, the commitment. Now you're on the board. But before step 1, there's this important distinction they make.
Right. A really crucial fork in the road. They distinguish between two types of ventures: innovation-driven enterprises, IDEs, and small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs.
Okay, IDEs versus SMEs.
And it's important context. This guide, coming out of that MIT environment, it's really focused on the IDE path. Both are vital, of course. But the framework is tailored for IDEs.
So what makes something an IDE? What are the characteristics?
Well, IDEs are usually built on something genuinely new, a novel technology, maybe a breakthrough process, or a totally different business model.
Something innovative, hence the name.
Exactly. And their goal isn't just to be, a nice little business. They're aiming for a significant competitive advantage over what's already out there.
Disruptive, maybe?
Often, yeah. The main driver is usually wealth creation, building substantial value. And, this is key, that often means they're willing to sacrifice total control.
How so?
They're willing to sell equity, shares in the company, to raise capital and fuel really aggressive growth. It's less about maintaining 100% ownership and more about making the pie much, much bigger.
Which often means multiple co-owners too, right? Takes a diverse team for that kind of ambition.
Usually, yeah. The scale requires it.
Yeah.
They have this mindset for exponential growth. Sometimes you hear it described as disrupt or die.
Wow. Intense.
It can be. And the vision is usually global, eventually. They want to scale rapidly and capture large markets.
Which is different from a typical SME, like a local restaurant or a consulting firm.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
SMEs scale differently. They might stay regional or focus on a specific niche. They can be incredibly successful, profitable, important, but the growth trajectory and the core goals are just different. This 24-step guide, it's built for that high-growth, potentially disruptive IDE journey.
Got it. So IDE focus, team committed, past step 0. We're
Mm.
ready for the game board. Phase 1 is finding your foothold in the market. Starts with step 1.
Step 1, market segmentation. This is
Wow.
where you begin, and you start broad,
Go.
brainstorming, thinking about every possible type of customer, every potential market where your idea or your tech could possibly fit. Just get it all down.
Sounds like you could end up with a huge list pretty quickly.
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly the point and the challenge. Because
Mhm.
as a startup, you have limited resources, right? Time, money, people.
Totally. You can't boil the
You
ocean.
can't. So
Right.
focus is everything. You have to narrow down who you're going after first. And the sources give this really strong warning here about a super common mistake. They call it the China syndrome.
China syndrome. Okay, I'm intrigued. What is that?
It's when entrepreneurs look at a absolutely massive market. The example they use is like toothbrushes in China, billions of people.
Right.
And the thinking goes, wow, if I could just get like 0.1% of that market, that's still millions of customers. I'll be rich.
It sounds so simple on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, the math seems compelling. 0.1% of a billion is still a million. Huge numbers.
Exactly. Spreadsheet dreams. But the sources say this is a dangerous trap, a total illusion, usually.
Why? What's the flaw? Because those numbers are just assumptions. You haven't proven anything. Why would any of those billion people buy your toothbrush? What makes it better than the dozens, hundreds maybe, already there from huge companies with massive budgets and distribution?
You haven't talked to anyone.
You haven't talked to the actual potential customers in that segment. You likely don't understand the existing market dynamics, the channels, the competition. A startup just doesn't have the firepower, the marketing dollars, the sales force to go head-to-head in a massive established market just to grab some tiny fraction. You'll get crushed.
Okay, so lesson learned. Don't chase tiny fractions of giant established markets. Where should a startup focus then?
The advice is crystal clear. Focus your limited resources on finding a smaller, specific market segment, one that's defensible, one where you can realistically become the dominant player.
Find a niche you can own.
Exactly. Find a group of customers where your specific innovation offers clear, significant value that they can't easily get somewhere else, a place you can actually win.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? The brainstorming and then the narrowing down.
You start wide, list everything. The sources suggest maybe organizing it visually, like a table with potential markets as columns. Get it all out there. And then comes the critical part. And they really hammer this home. You need to spend serious time on this. Weeks, maybe. Not just a couple of days.
Weeks. Okay, doing what?
The most important thing. Get out of the building. Go talk. Talk directly to potential customers in those segments you brainstormed.
Primary research.
Absolutely essential. Don't just sit in a conference room debating with your co-founders. Don't just rely on Google searches. You need those real-world conversations to start validating or, just as importantly, invalidating your ideas about these markets.
That makes total sense. You can't really know if a market's viable, if there's a real need, until you talk to the people in it.
Precisely. And that direct feedback, that ground-level research, it directly feeds into the next key step, which, skipping step 2 for a moment in their sequence, is step 3.
Step 3, identifying the beachhead market.
Right. So based on all that analysis, all those customer conversations from step 1, now you make the call. You pick the single best initial target market from your list. This is your beachhead.
The first place you attack and conquer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's where you'll focus all your initial energy and resources. Like landing on a beach in an invasion, you establish a secure foothold there first.
How do you decide which one is the best beachhead? Are there criteria?
Yes. The sources build on Jeffrey Moore's ideas here and give 3 key conditions for a good beachhead. First, the customers in that market should buy similar kinds of products or services already. They understand the category, basically.
Okay.
Second, they should have similar sales cycles and expect similar kinds of value from a solution. You're not dealing with wildly different buying processes.
Makes the sales process repeatable.
Right. And third, this one's really important for scaling efficiently. Word of mouth from one customer needs to be able to influence other potential customers within that same segment.
So they talk to each other, they're a relatively connected, homogeneous group.
Pretty much. In terms of their needs, their buying behavior, and how information spreads. If you get one happy customer, they can help you get the next one much more easily.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned earlier the end user versus the people who actually pay.
Yeah, the sources touch on that here too. The distinction between the end user who actually uses the product and the decision-making unit, the DMU, which includes the person with the budget, the buyer.
Right.
At this early stage, The advice is to really focus heavily on understanding the end user. Because if the person using it doesn't see the value, doesn't want it, doesn't like it, well, the buyer isn't going to pay for it for long, if at all.
The user has to love it first.
Fundamentally, yes. We'll get deeper into the whole DMU structure later on, around step 12.
What about businesses that have two distinct sides, like, say, a marketplace?
That's a great question. Multi-sided markets.
Yeah.
Like eBay needs buyers and sellers. Or the example in the sources, Medium, wanted to be like an iTunes for art. They needed artists and art buyers.
So who's your beachhead then?
You have to analyze both sides. Which side is more critical to get first? Which side is harder to attract? Medium realized that convincing artists to digitize their work and put it online was the bigger hurdle. Consumer demand for art was probably already there.
So they had to focus their beachhead efforts on the artists, build the supply first.
Exactly. Figure out which side of the market is your biggest bottleneck or your biggest dependency, and make that your initial beachhead focus.
That's a really smart insight. Focus on the constraint.
Right. So once you've picked that beachhead market and you've really started to understand the end user within it, you move to step 4.
Step 4, calculating the total addressable market, or TAM, size for that beachhead market.
Okay, now we're getting into numbers. This is about quantifying the opportunity within that specific narrow beachhead you just chose. You use the details you gathered about your end user in step 3 to estimate how big this specific segment actually is.
Is this where we pull out the spreadsheets again, hopefully more grounded this time?
Yes, there's calculation involved, but it's framed very differently. It's a crucial sanity check.
Sanity check.
Yeah. Is this beachhead market actually big enough to build a real business eventually? Is it worth pursuing? But also, critically, is it not so enormous that it smells like that China syndrome trap again? It needs to be focused.
Find that Goldilocks zone. Not too big, not too small.
Kinda, yeah. Big enough to matter, small enough to win. And the how is really important here.
Not just grabbing a percentage of some industry report number.
Definitely not. The sources push hard for a bottom-up calculation.
Bottom up, meaning?
Meaning you try to count the actual potential customers or units within your very specific defined segment. You build the estimate from the ground up rather than taking a huge top-down market number and just guessing your share.
Can you give an example of doing that bottom-up calculation?
The Sensible Technologies example they used is perfect. They first thought industrial design was their beachhead. But talking to users, they realized that was way too broad.
Too diverse.
Exactly. So they segmented it further based on the types of shapes designers worked with, like geometric shapes, mathematical surfaces, or more free-form organic sculptural shapes.
Yeah.
They decided to make their beachhead the organic sculptural segment, specifically targeting toy designers and shoe designers first. Very specific.
Wow, that's really narrowing it down. So how did they figure out the TAM for just that group?
They started literally listing the names of specific companies, toy companies, shoe companies, across key regions, US, Asia, Europe. Hasbro, Mattel, Fisher-Price here, Bandai, Tommy over in Asia, Schleich, Playmobil in Europe.
So identifying actual potential customer organizations.
Right, and doing that immediately showed them it was a global market, not just US-based. That itself refined their beachhead definition. Then came the really crucial part.
Hitting the numbers.
Estimating the number of actual industrial designers working on those organic shapes within those specific target companies, like Hasbro or Mattel. And the sources point out they could get these estimates because they'd already spent weeks talking to users on the ground in steps 1 and 3.
So those initial conversations paid off again.
Hugely. They had built, as the sources say, earned trust and credibility with people inside those companies. That trust allowed them to get realistic estimates of the number of relevant designers. It wasn't guesswork.
So that direct customer interaction from step 1 is fundamental not just for understanding needs, but for actually getting the data for the TAM calculation in step 4. It's all connected.
It's absolutely connected. You build rapport, you get insights, you get data. And the sources also really stress going beyond basic demographics when you build that end-user persona back in step 3.
Like the Ed Champ example.
Yeah, Ed Champ, the industrial designer at Hasbro working on toys. His persona wasn't just job title, age, income. It included his background, his personality, saw himself as an artist, his habits, like preferring clay modeling, being frustrated by existing digital tools.
Even what computer he used at home versus work.
Yeah, PC at the office, Mac at home, what music he liked, technopop. How he dressed, wore black, piercings, tattoos. It painted a really rich picture.
Why is that level of detail so important? It seems almost intrusive.
Because that rich context helps you truly understand their deeper motivations, their pain points beyond just the functional job description. It tells you how they see the world, what influences them, how best to communicate with them. It's way more powerful than just defining a segment like 25, 34-year-old male makes 75K plus FIDE like sports and girls, the baseball website example.
Right, that baseball persona was demographically clear, but maybe didn't tell you much about how he'd actually use the site.
Exactly. The sources say it lacked the depth needed to really understand the life cycle use case, how the product would fit into his actual life and workflow. That richer persona, like Ed Champs, gives you that crucial context.
Okay, so phase 1. Segment, find the beachhead, build a deep persona, calculate the TAM bottom up. What else is critical for that initial market foothold?
Let's jump ahead slightly in the sequence they present to step 9. Identifying required adjacent products.
Adjacent products, like complements.
Exactly. The idea is simple but vital. Customers need a whole product solution. Your amazing new thing almost never works in a vacuum. To actually get value, customers often needed to work with other stuff they already use or have to buy.
Like needing ink for your printer, or specific software for your hardware.
Precisely. Or enterprise software needing to plug into their existing database, or CRM. The sensible example again. For those industrial designers, their cool haptic device was useless unless it integrated smoothly with the graphics software they already used day in, day out, like Alias Wavefront.
So Sensible had to support specific file formats.
Absolutely. They needed to support industry standards like NURBS, because for their customers, NURBS wasn't just some technical detail, it was tied to huge investments they'd already made in expensive software. Sensible also had to ensure things like compatibility with the digital pens designers were used to, and maybe making sure certain processing units were available if needed.
These weren't things Sensible sold, but they were necessary for the customer to actually use the Sensible product effectively.
Correct. Sensible had to understand the entire ecosystem their customers lived in. Their existing tools, their workflow, what the sources called downstream systems, the data formats they needed for input and output. It wasn't enough to just have a cool device. It had to fit into the designer's world.
That really underscores needing to understand the customer's whole context, not just their isolated need for your specific product.
Absolutely critical. So those steps, segmentation, beachhead, persona, TAM, adjacent products, that really lays the groundwork in phase 1. Once you've got that market footing defined, you move into phase 2, defining the product itself.
Okay, phase 2, kicking off with step 7, visualizing the product.
The goal here is straightforward but really powerful. Create something tangible, something visual that represents your product. It could be a simple brochure, a mock-up, maybe some screenshots of how the software might look, even a short video.
Why do this?
To make sure everyone is on the same page. Your own team, potential customers, maybe early investors. You want a shared understanding of what this thing is and, more importantly, what benefits it delivers.
But this isn't actually building it yet, right?
No, absolutely not. And that's the key point, the sources stress. This is not a working prototype.
Yeah.
It's not a detailed technical spec sheet. The whole point is speed and flexibility.
So you can change it easily.
Exactly. You want to get feedback quickly and be able to iterate without having sunk a ton of time and money into building something complex. It's about the general overview, as they put it, not getting caught up in the specifics of the final implementation.
The lifetime supply brochure example seems like a perfect case study for this.
It really is. Remember, they were planning this service for college students, sending essentials like snacks, toiletries. They created a brochure. It showed the product categories, highlighted the benefits and convenience for students, peace of mind for parents maybe paying for it.
But the website, the app, none of that existed yet.
Nope, just the brochure. But creating it forced the team to really clarify their value proposition for different people, students, and parents. And they could show it around, get reactions, change it easily based on feedback. Way faster and cheaper than coding up a website.
And the final product might end up looking quite different from that initial brochure.
Totally fine. That's the point.
Yep.
It's about aligning understanding and getting early validation without locking yourself in too early.
Okay, so you visualize it. Then the next step in defining the product is step 8. Quantifying the value proposition.
Right. Now you need to get really crisp on exactly what specific, measurable benefit your product offers the customer, especially compared to what they're doing now or compared to competitors.
Quantifiable, does that always mean like saving X dollars or Y hours? A hard number.
Often it does, and those are great if you have them. But the sources acknowledge it's not always a simple ROI calculation. Value can be emotional. It can be qualitative. It can be about enabling something entirely new.
Like the sensible example again. For the designers.
Exactly. For those toy and shoe designers, yeah, maybe it saves some time eventually, but the core value was enabling a more intuitive, artistic way of designing. It let them interact with digital models using a sense of touch, overcoming the frustrations of purely mouse and keyboard-based tools. That's harder to put a dollar figure on, but was the fundamental value.
Enabling a better experience, not just efficiency.
Precisely. Or think about the InTouch example, the device for pregnant women. The value there wasn't saving money or time. It was about strengthening the emotional bond with the unborn baby, providing reassurance. That's incredibly powerful value for the target customer, first-time moms especially, even if you can't easily quantify it. The sources mentioned their visuals comparing the current state to the potential really hit home on that emotional level.
Okay. And the meter example, the cow biosensor, that seems more straightforwardly quantifiable.
Yeah, that one's clearer. Early disease detection in cattle. The value translates directly into fewer sick cows, lower vet bills, reduced mortality in the herd. You can absolutely put numbers on that for a farmer. The key is identifying that specific benefit your product delivers and trying to measure it, quantify it relative to the customer's alternative.
So we're visualizing the product, getting clear on its value. What about the deeper foundation, the long-term advantage?
That brings us to step 11, identifying your core competency. This was huge. Your core competency is that unique thing your team or company does exceptionally well. It's an asset, a capability, maybe deep knowledge, that gives you a sustainable edge over competitors.
Sustainable being the key word, something hard to copy.
Exactly. It shouldn't be easy for someone else to replicate quickly. It's more fundamental than just having a cool feature this month.
What are some examples of strong core competencies?
The sources list a few common ones. Network effects is a big one.
Where the product gets better as more people use it.
Right. Think eBay, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google's ad network. The value for each user grows as the network itself grows Metcalfe's law. It creates this powerful reinforcing loop. They mentioned MySpace failed to really leverage its early network effect as a core competency, which hurt it.
Okay. What else?
Customer service. Building a culture and the processes for truly outstanding service, that can be incredibly hard to copy effectively. It leads to loyal customers, lower churn, great word of mouth, which cuts your acquisition costs. Think Zappos, historically Nordstrom, maybe Warby Parker. It takes deep commitment, unique metrics like no questions asked returns.
Low cost, being the cheapest.
Yeah, achieving a fundamentally lower cost structure that lets you consistently undercut competitors while still being profitable. The Tata Nano car is mentioned as aiming for this, though sometimes low cost is more of an entry strategy than a lasting core competency. And just having one cheaper component, like an engine, isn't it? It has to be systemic.
User experience, UX, is another one.
Definitely. A relentless, almost obsessive focus on making the product incredibly easy and delightful to use. Think Apple. That requires a specific company culture, top design talent, and making UX a priority right from the CEO down. It's not just about aesthetics, it's deep usability.
What about things that seem like advantages but maybe aren't core competencies?
The sources specifically call out supplier relationships. Having an exclusive deal might be great temporarily, but competitors can often find alternatives or build similar relationships over time. It's usually not a deep, sustainable advantage.
How did Sensible figure out and build their core competency?
They did a lot of soul searching, apparently. They identified their core competency as understanding the physical properties of 3D touch. It wasn't just having the haptic technology, it was the deep expertise in how to apply it effectively in a design context.
So the know-how, not just the hardware.
Exactly. And they deliberately built on that. They strategically hired key people, even whole teams, from universities known for this work, MIT, Brown, Stanford. They nurtured relationships with researchers, recruited top talent, and made sure their culture and even compensation reflected how important the specific expertise was. It was the team's unique ability to leverage that knowledge that became their defendable advantage.
That makes sense. It's embedded in the people and the organization. Okay, phase 3. Building your business model and proving unit economics. This feels like where the rubber meets the road financially.
Totally. This phase is all about the money. How will you actually make it? And crucially, does the business work financially on a per-customer basis? It starts with step 12, identifying the decision-making unit, DMU.
We touched on the end user versus the DMU earlier. Now we dig deeper.
Yep. Now you need to map out everyone who has a say in whether your product gets purchased. This includes the end user, sure, but also the champion, the person inside the customer organization who really wants your product and advocates for it. Then there's the primary economic buyer, the one controlling the budget, signing the check, plus various influencers, primary and secondary, whose opinions carry weight. And, critically, anyone with veto power.
Veto power. Someone who can just kill the deal.
Yeah, someone who, for whatever reason, can unilaterally say no, regardless of what others think. Could be IT security, could be legal, could be a powerful executive. Understanding all these roles, their motivations, their concerns, their influence, it's crucial for navigating the sale.
Sounds complicated, especially in big companies. Why is mapping this out so vital?
Because if you don't know who you need to convince, what they care about, and who can block you, you're flying blind. The sources give this really stark example, Freddie's payment idea.
What happened there?
His idea was for kids, they were the end users, parents or influencers. They liked the idea of controlling spending. Seemed okay, but Freddie completely missed the real economic buyer and veto power.
Who was it?
State banking regulators. To run his payment system legally, he discovered he needed banking licenses in every single state.
Whoa, that's a huge hurdle.
Massive. The cost, the complexity, the ongoing compliance burden. It was overwhelming. The regulators effectively had veto power. Freddie realized he didn't want to be in that business, and the whole thing died before it even launched because he hadn't understood the full DMU, particularly the regulatory piece.
That's a painful lesson. Ignoring a key part of the DMU can be fatal.
Absolutely. Even in the simpler parent-child example, the parent is the buyer, the child is the user. Your product might need features that appeal to both, maybe parental controls for the parent's peace of mind, while still being fun for the kid. You have to satisfy the relevant parts of the DMU.
Okay, understand the DMU. Got it. Then, step 15 is defining the business model.
And the sources kick this off with a super important principle worth repeating loud and clear. Free is not a business model.
Huh. Say it again for the people in the back running on VC fumes.
Exactly. Look, things like freemium, where you offer a basic version for free, or that classic startup line, we'll get users first, then figure out how to make money later. Those are user acquisition strategies. They are not, in themselves, a business model.
A real business needs paying customers.
A real business doesn't exist until someone, somewhere, is actually paying you for the value you provide. Period.
So relying just on user growth metrics, hoping for an acquisition based on eyeballs, that's risky.
It's extremely risky. The sources call these lottery tickets businesses. Maybe you get lucky and get acquired, but you haven't built something with a sustainable, proven way to generate revenue. It's not a solid foundation.
Okay, so what are some actual business models startups should consider?
The sources list quite a few, and they encourage creativity, mix and match, look outside your industry. Some common ones include a simple one-time charge, buy it, you own it, common for goods, software licenses.
Okay.
Cost plus. Customer pays your cost plus a percentage markup. Often seen in consulting, government work. Good when scope is unclear but can disincentivize efficiency. Hourly. Similar idea, pay for time. Again, flexible for variable work but can reward activity over results. Subscription or leasing. Regular payments, like monthly or yearly. Great for predictable recurring revenue. They mention variations like getting annual commitments up front, maybe with a discount, which is fantastic for cash flow. The Yankee Group example used this effectively.
What else?
Consumables. The classic razor and blades model. Sell the base product cheap, make money on the refills or parts people have to keep buying. Usage-based. Pay for what you use, like electricity or cloud computing resources.
Right, yeah.
Advertising. Monetize an audience by selling access to advertisers. They Google, Facebook, old media. These huge scale. Risky is the only model for most startups.
Data models.
Yeah, data resale or access. Selling aggregated user data or premium access to data like LinkedIn does for recruiters often needs a free tier to attract the users whose data becomes valuable. And they mention the mobile phone model, a base fee for a certain usage level, then higher charges if you exceed it. Intralinks use this for secure document sharing base fee plus per document charges. Gives predictable revenue plus flexibility.
Lots of options there. So once you pick a model or combination, you need prices. Step 16, setting the pricing framework.
Exactly. How much do you actually charge? And this can't be arbitrary. It has to tie directly back to your value proposition. From step 8, what value are you delivering? And your understanding of the DMU from step 12, what are they willing and able to pay? What factors influence their decision? It's both rational and emotional.
The Helios example, the anti-icing film for trucks.
Yeah, they price their solution as an annual service coating plus the software at $100 per vehicle per year. That price wasn't random. It came from their analysis of the value, less downtime, lower de-icing costs, and what they thought a fleet manager could justify paying compared to their current pain points and costs.
Okay, business model and pricing set. Now we get to the really core unit economics calculations. Step 17, calculating the lifetime value of an acquired customer, LTV.
This is absolutely fundamental. LTV represents the total net profit you expect to make from a single average customer over the entire time they remain your customer. It's the key metric for figuring out if your business actually works financially at the customer level.
And there's that critical rule of thumb tied to LTV.
Yes, the big one. Your LTV needs to be at least 3 times greater than your cost of customer acquisition, or KOCA.
LTV 3x a COCA.
3 times. Why 3? It allows enough margin to cover your overhead, your R&D, your operating costs, and still generate profit for growth and sustainability. If your LTV isn't significantly higher than what it costs you to get that customer, your economics are fundamentally broken. You can't scale an unprofitable model.
Okay, so how do you calculate LTV? What goes into it?
Generally, you need to estimate the average revenue per customer over time. Then apply your gross margin percentage revenue minus the direct costs of serving that customer. You factor in your retention rate, what percentage of customers stick around each period, which tells you your churn rate. And crucially, you have to discount future profits back to their present value using a discount rate reflecting the time value of money at risk. You sum up those discounted profits over the expected customer lifetime.
Let's look at the Helios LTV calculation again from the source.
Right, they walk through it. Helios assumed about $100,000 in first-year revenue per fleet customer, that big initial install. They projected some price increases, assumed a pretty high 90% retention rate, a very high 97% gross margin, and used a 40% discount rate reflecting startup risk.
And what did the LTV number turn out to be?
Surprisingly low, actually. Even with those fairly optimistic assumptions, the calculated LTV was only in the range of maybe $100,000 to $125,000 per fleet customer.
Why was that surprising given the $100 K first year?
Because the model was so front-loaded. Most of the value came from that initial sale. The ongoing recurring revenue wasn't high enough to significantly boost the LTV over time, even with good retention. And critically, this LTV calculation was done before considering the cost to actually land that big fleet customer.
So LTV alone doesn't tell the whole story. It immediately points to the other side of the equation.
Exactly. Calculating the LTV was a wake-up call for Helios. It showed them, before they invested heavily in sales, that their unit economics might be shaky. An LTV of only 100K to 125K meant they desperately needed to either increase that value somehow or slash the cost of acquiring a customer, or both.
Which brings us neatly to step 19, calculating the cost of customer acquisition, COCA.
Right. KOCA is the total sales and marketing costs required to get one single new paying customer. And it's not just the ad spend for that specific customer or the commission paid on that one deal.
It's everything.
It's all your sales and marketing expenses over a period, divided by the number of new customers acquired in that period. So it includes salaries, commissions, marketing materials, website costs, trade shows, advertising, travel, everything, and, crucially, it includes the cost of pursuing all the prospects who didn't buy.
You have to factor in the cost of the no's.
Absolutely. That's a key point the sources make. Think about all the time and effort spent on leads that never converted. That cost has to be allocated across the customers you did win. They use that metaphor. How many frogs do you have to kiss? The cost includes kissing all the frogs, not just the prince.
So back to Helios and their big fleet customers.
Selling to a large fleet, that's a long, complex sales cycle. Multiple meetings, demos, proposals, negotiations. It takes significant time from expensive salespeople. Sources estimate the KOCA for one of those deals could easily be $30,000, maybe even $50,000 or more.
Okay, so if COA is $50K and LTV is maybe $100K, $125K.
Now you see the problem. The ratio is only 2.1, maybe 2.5.1 at best, not the needed 3.1. Calculating KOCA alongside LTV starkly revealed the flawed economics of their initial plan before they went all in.
So a huge focus in Phase 3 is getting that LTV versus COCA balance right. What strategies do the sources mention for sales and for lowering COCA?
They talk about evolving the sales process. Early on, it's often direct sales, focused on demand generation, just getting those first crucial customers. Later, you need processes for fulfillment, managing relationships, upselling, and you might start using indirect channels.
Like distributors or VARs, value-added resellers.
Exactly. For reaching smaller customers or specific verticals where a direct sales force is too expensive, distributors and VARs can lower your direct QCA significantly because they use their existing sales teams and relationships.
But there's a trade-off.
Big trade-off. They take a cut, a significant percentage of the revenue, reducing your gross margin per sale. Could be 15%, 25%, 45%, or even more. So you trade lower QCA for lower margin. It's a strategic choice based on your LTV for that channel.
The sources also give examples of online businesses and their key CA strategies.
Yeah, interesting contrasts. Zynga with Farmville relied heavily on viral loops on Facebook. Minimal sales team needed. Groupon, on the other hand, had a huge direct sales force with high QCA to sign up local merchants, but relied on virality for the consumer side.
It did.
Uses direct sales for its high-value recruiter products, but leverages the network effect for general user growth. Urban Daddy used targeted email. LARK, the hardware startup, sold through the Apple Store, instant credibility and reach, lower direct QCA, but Apple takes its cut, impacting margin.
So what are some general ways to push QCA down?
Automate everything you can, especially using your website and digital marketing. Build in viral mechanics if possible, referral programs, network effects. Sources mention Avon and Groupon's referral models. And use creative, standout marketing.
Like the Dollar Shave Club video.
That's the classic example they detail. The founder used his background to make this super low-budget, funny video. It hit the target audience's pain points perfectly, presented a simple value prop dollar razors in a totally unexpected way.
And it went massively viral.
Instantly.
Yeah.
The point wasn't that the video made the sale directly, but it generated a gigantic list of interested leads for almost no money. It dramatically lowered the initial cost of reaching a potential customer. The challenge then shifted to converting those leads, but getting them aware and interested. The video crushed that part of the QCA equation through creativity.
Okay, phase 3. Nail the business model, prove the LTV 3x EOCA math, figure out sales and how to acquire customers efficiently. Once you think you've got that figured out, where do you go?
That leads you into phase 4, testing assumptions and proving the business model. Because even after all that analysis, you've still made a ton of assumptions about your customer, their needs, how they'll use your product, how they'll buy, whether the economics really hold up in the wild. So step 20 is explicitly identifying key assumptions.
Just listing them all out, all the things you're still taking on faith.
Pretty much. Make them explicit. Write them down. Because the next step, step 21, is testing key assumptions. You need to know what you need to test.
I need to test them effectively, not just more spreadsheets, right?
Right. The goal here is real-world validation. Design and run the cheapest, fastest possible experiments to prove or disprove your most critical assumptions before you commit serious resources to building the full product or scaling up. You want evidence.
The Facebook polling example was great for this. Fast and cheap.
Fantastic example. Students hypothesize Facebook ads could be better for political polls than phones. Test 1. Under $100, run overnight. Results didn't quite match pro polls. Refine the ad design. Test 2. Under $50, run again. Boom. Results matched polls costing $100,000 and taking days.
Yeah, they found something else too.
Yeah. While testing their poll idea, they accidentally proved how powerful targeted Facebook ads were for pollsters. That opened up a whole new, potentially bigger business opportunity selling targeted ad services to polling firms. The test revealed unexpected value.
And the inspired coffee chalk wall test. Even simpler.
So simple. Assumption. Will people write inspiring things on a public wall?
Yeah.
Test. Put up a prompt on an existing wall at MIT. Observe. Cost. Basically zero. Result. Wall covered in hours. Assumption validated. It confirmed a core engagement idea for their coffee truck concept instantly.
Okay, testing assumptions leads to step 22, defining the minimum viable business product, MVBP. And the sources specifically contrast this with the standard lean startup MVP.
Yes, it's a specific definition in this framework. A typical MVP in lean startup thinking is often the smallest thing to test one assumption. The MVBP here is described as more of a system test.
A system test, meaning?
The MVBP is the smallest, simplest version of your product or service that is complete enough to actually prove the core business model works. And how do you prove that? By having real customers pay for it and get real value from it.
The payment part is key.
Absolutely crucial. Remember, no business until someone pays. The MVBP has to deliver enough value that a customer makes that transaction. That gives you real feedback on whether the whole value exchange, product delivery, payment actually functions.
So it's validating the entire loop, not just one feature.
Exactly. proving the business, not just the product concept in isolation. The home team therapy example fits this perfectly. Their big vision involved fancy Connect motion tracking for physical therapy exercises. Super complex.
But their MVBP wasn't that.
No way. They stripped it way back.
Yep.
The MVBP was just online videos showing the exercises, plus a simple way for patients to connect with a real physical therapist online for guidance.
So they deliberately skipped the hardest, riskiest tech part initially.
Totally. They de-risked it massively. This simple MVBP let them test the fundamental question: would patients and doctors actually use and pay for any kind of online PT support? They focused on delivering core value, improving the basic business model first, before sinking time and money into complex motion tracking.
The Style Up fashion email service also had a super low-tech MVBP.
Yeah, their core assumption: women want daily personalized fashion tips based on the weather. MVBP. Manually curate and send daily emails with outfit ideas and forecasts to a small group. Started with friends, then non-friends.
So no fancy algorithm yet, just people doing it by hand.
Exactly. Low-tech, manual, that was their MVBP. It let them quickly prove demand, get direct feedback on what worked, what didn't. Super fast learning cycle.
That sounds like the Wizard of Oz technique people talk about.
It is also called manual first. You simulate the complex back-end manually. The postcard builder example is classic. User designs a postcard online, clicks send. What happens? An email goes to a team member who manually prints and mails the postcard. Looks automated to the user, but it's manual behind the curtain. Proves demand and willingness to pay before you build the expensive automation.
All this testing the MVBP, it leads to this really blunt concept in step 26.
Yes. Step 26. The dogs will eat the dog food test. Love this one. It's a brutal but essential reality check.
What's the core idea?
Just because your product makes perfect logical sense to you, just because it works, just because it seems to offer clear value on paper, doesn't mean customers will actually use it or pay for it. Human behavior isn't always rational. People have habits. They resist change.
And the dog food anecdote illustrates this.
Yeah, the story goes, a company made this nutritionally perfect dog food. Owners bought it, it sounded great, but the dogs wouldn't touch it. Taste, smell, who knows? The business failed because the end users, the dogs, rejected it, even though the buyers, the owners, were convinced.
How does this apply to real businesses?
The sources use the long, slow adoption of electronic medical records, EMRs, as a prime example. The technology was there for decades. The benefits, efficiency, better care seemed obvious. But for years, doctors, the end users, were incredibly resistant to changing their workflows.
The dogs wouldn't eat the dog food.
Exactly what the sources say. Habits were too ingrained. The perceived hassle outweighed the promised benefits for many users. Lots of EMR startups failed waiting for adoption that took far longer than expected because the end users just wouldn't consistently use the systems, even if the hospital administration, the buyers, bought them.
So the ultimate test for your MVBP is twofold. Will the users, dogs, actually use it regularly? And will the buyers, owners, the DMU, actually pay for it?
Both have to happen. User adoption and payment. That's the real proof the business model works. Once you get that signal from your MVBP, you move to step 23, measuring customer acceptance and driving excitement.
This sounds like it's about more than just getting the first sale. It's about seeing if customers really value it and become advocates.
Precisely. Are they just using it or are they loving it? Are they telling others? Key metrics here shift towards engagement and potential virality.
Like what metrics specifically?
Engagement metrics. Are they opening your emails, clicking links, spending time in your app, using key features, and viral metrics? Are they referring new users? Is positive word of mouth happening organically?
Style Up, the fashion email service, tracked this well.
Yeah, great example. Their email open rates were astronomical, like 70% versus a typical 14% industry average. That showed huge engagement. People valued the content. And they tracked referral links. They got their first 1,500 users almost entirely through word of mouth, no marketing spend. Later, they saw 20% monthly growth, driven largely by referrals. That's strong validation.
What else signals strong acceptance? Low churn, testimonials.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Low churn means customers are sticking around, seeing ongoing value. Positive testimonials, as the sources note, are quantifiable success metrics in their own way. The Thrive Hive example really emphasizes this. They obsessed over providing value greater than their price. Started with no contracts to force honest feedback. They tracked churn, very low. Referrals, over 50% of new business, and what customers were actually saying.
And only when all three, low churn, high referrals, positive buzz, were strong did they feel they'd truly passed the dogs eating the dog food test in a scalable way.
Exactly. That trifecta told them they had something real, something customers valued and would advocate for, and that the economics worked. That signaled they were ready to think about scaling.
Okay, so we've gone through finding the market, defining the product, proving the unit economics, testing assumptions, getting paid via an MVPP, and measuring real customer love. What's the final step on this 24-step game board? Step 24.
Step 24, developing a product plan for adjacent markets. Now that you've conquered your beachhead, built a solid foundation, proven the model, now you think about growth, expanding strategically.
Moving beyond that initial niche.
Right. Either into adjacent market segments, groups, similar to your beachhead but maybe with slightly different needs, or by offering new products or services to your existing beachhead customers.
The bowling pin analogy.
Exactly. From Jeffrey Moore. Your beachhead is the head pin. Pin #1. Knocking it down gives you the momentum, credibility, and resources to start hitting the adjacent pins, pins 2 and 3, nearby markets, or the pins behind it, follow-on products for pin #1's market.
And your product probably needs to evolve as you expand.
Almost certainly. You'll likely need new features, maybe different packaging or positioning, adjusted pricing for these new segments or offerings. And this is critical, the expansion must leverage your core competency. You grow from your unique strength.
How did Sensible plan their growth after the toy and shoe design beachhead?
Having dominated that organic sculptural design niche, their plan was to move into adjacent design areas. Jewelry, animation, maybe consumer products, electronics, even automotive design.
Which required changing the product.
Yes. They knew this meant adding capabilities supporting different kinds of geometric shapes, not just sculptural ones. And crucially, supporting additional industry-standard file formats, like polygons alongside NURBS, to fit into the workflows and existing systems used in those different industries. They planned the product evolution needed for that market expansion.
Okay, that brings us through the 24 steps of the disciplined entrepreneurship framework itself, a really practical roadmap. Now, the source material also had that other section, the historical notes about French Indochina. Seems quite different.
Yeah, it was definitely a distinct chunk of information included in the sources, details about colonial administration, figures, places, events from that era. Since it was provided, we should probably touch on it briefly, just reporting neutrally what was there.
Okay, let's do that. A quick neutral summary of that tangential historical info. They mention specific French administrators.
Figures like Marie-André Roussel de Courcy, initially given authority over Tonkin and Annam. His successor, Paul Burke, sometimes called Governor General Paul Robert. Then the formal creation of the Indochina Union in 1887 brought the official governor-general role, overseeing Tonkin, Annam, Cochin China, Cambodia. The position of chief resident for Annam Tonkin was apparently abolished around 1889. Paul Dimmer was mentioned later regarding administrative structures.
And lots of specific place names were mentioned, too.
Yes, Hang Su Street in Hanoi, historically linked to coffin making. Kyu Village for gold leaf. In Cambodia, the Tonle Sap system, Passet River, Pursat, Kampo. In Laos, Savanakhet, the Mekong waterfalls, Luang Prabang, Champasak, Saravane. Also places like Guangzhou Bay in China, Java, Manchuria came up.
Historical figures and events beyond the administrators.
Yeah, Cohen Van Cum, noted for studying abroad. Nguyen Truong Cup's poetry with French translations, a text called Duan Hon Chi Luc. Even Clogo's assertion in a poem. Conflicts like Ton Tot Tut's 1885 attack in Hu, uprisings led by figures like Lei Trung Hin, Nguyen Con's role in suppressing resistance movements, and Honk Hoa Tam, or A Tam, leading the Long Yan, the uprising, including a truce period.
Events elsewhere, too.
Right. The Sino-Japanese War, the Boxer Rebellion in China, also the Russo-Japanese War and the Spanish-American War were referenced as part of the broader context of the times.
Infrastructure projects came up.
Briefly. Construction of bridges like Long Binh, Trang Tien, Ham Rong were mentioned, though one specific project didn't happen. French firms like Day.
And background French politics.
The Fachota incident with Britain and Africa and the Dreyfus Affair in France were mentioned as relevant events influencing the era.
Okay. Thanks for covering that historical tangent from the sources, just laying out the facts presented there. It definitely feels separate from the main thread.
It does, yeah. A different stream of information included in the material.
Right. So let's bring our focus back firmly to the core entrepreneurial journey we've unpacked today using this disciplined framework. We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. Starting with that absolute need for focus in phase 1, deep market segmentation. driven by actually talking to customers, choosing that specific beachhead market using clear criteria, building detailed end-user personas, not just demographics, and calculating the TAM for that beachhead bottom-up, like Sensible did.
Then phase 2, defining the product. Visualizing it first with mock-ups or brochures for shared understanding, like lifetime supply. Quantifying the value proposition, articulating the specific benefit, whether it's hard numbers like meter or more emotional like in touch, and identifying and building that unique, defendable core competency, like Sensible's deep knowledge of 3D touch.
Phase 3, the business model and unit economics. Mapping the whole decision-making unit, avoiding pitfalls like Freddie's regulatory blind spot, defining the actual business model, how you get paid moving past free, setting prices based on value and the DMU.
And those crucial calculations. LTV and co-CA. Understanding the LTV-3x co-CA rule, seeing how doing the math early, like Helios, can flag fundamental issues, and exploring strategies to improve those economics, lower QoCA using automation, virality, or creative marketing like Dollar Shave Club.
And phase 4, the reality check. Identifying your key assumptions, then testing them with cheap, fast experiments like the Facebook poll or the chalk wall. Defining the minimum viable business product, MVP, the smallest thing that proves the whole business model by getting paid value, using techniques like Wizard of Oz if needed, and facing the ultimate dogs will eat the dog food test, will users actually use it and buyers actually pay for it, remembering the EMR struggles.
And finally, measuring that true customer acceptance beyond the first sale, looking at engagement, low churn, referrals like StyleUp and ThriveHive did, and only then, once the beachhead is secure and the model proven, using step 24 to plan expansion into adjacent markets, leveraging your core competency, like Sensible planned.
Yeah, the whole arc, the whole message running through this framework is pretty clear, isn't it? Building a successful IDE isn't just about a cool idea or fancy tech. That's the starting point, maybe.
Yeah.
But success comes from discipline, from execution, from deeply understanding your specific customer, and from systematically proving step by step that your business model actually works in the real world, that people will use it, pay for it, and that the economics make sense before you bet the farm on scaling. Prove the dogs eat it, and the owner pays for it.
It really provides a much-needed structure for that early-stage chaos. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Think about an idea you have right now. Could be a business idea, a project, just a problem you want to solve. How might applying just one or two of these discipline steps, maybe really defining the beachhead user, or calculating a rough LTV, or designing a super cheap test for a key assumption, how might that change how you see that idea's potential?
Yeah, what's one assumption about your idea that you could test quickly and cheaply, maybe even this week?
A great challenge. On that note, we'll leave you with that thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.